Hello, everyone. A mini atmospheric river is flowing around a dome of hot air. In the middle of that river, severe weather potential and also some heavy rains over the next couple of days. How hot is that hot air dome? Pretty sizable. We've got heat indices well above 100 degrees through much of the east, southeast, and east central part of the country. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Let's get right into this. Advisories and or warnings for heat are flying through much of the eastern U.S. The heat advisories start in eastern parts of Missouri and Arkansas and spread all the way to the Atlantic pretty much, not counting New England. The only thing that happens between the Mississippi River and the ocean is that it upgrades to a extreme heat warning through much of North Carolina, Virginia, up into parts of Pennsylvania. A watch for extreme heat there in West Virginia. The late afternoon heat indices, and I remember a heat index is a combination of temperature and how high the humidity is, and dew points are a real good absolute measure of that. They're running pretty high. A couple of interesting things going on. First of all, the highest heat index values certainly on average go to parts of Georgia and the Carolinas, even parts of Virginia. Also, look at the high heat index values from St. Louis down the Mississippi River. The reason for that is this river is a valley and it's also a moisture source, and it tends to trap higher dew points. So that's why a lot of times you see that little pocket of hotter temperatures. And then actually, look at the Appalachian Mountains. Those are very visible. It's not as hot up there, so the heat index values are lower. And then what's going on here? We'll explain those lower heat index values out there in North Carolina here in a second. So the heat index forecast for Thursday has those readings well above 100, again from Virginia right down to really Georgia, certainly including the Carolinas. And you see it popping up to that value occasionally out maybe further west, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, those areas. On Friday, the cooling effects of more showers and thunderstorms and a weak cool front, still just as hot really in the Carolinas. This upper level ridge that's causing this is not really budging a whole lot out in the southeastern U.S. It will be indented somewhat later on this weekend across the central plains. So here is the water vapor loop this time. I usually show you the visible loop, but I just decided to change it up here a little bit today. This is that mini atmospheric river I was talking about. This right here, this is moisture that is showing up, and it has two sources. It actually comes in from the Gulf a little bit and taps a little bit of the Pacific too. So this goes up and over this hot air ridge. Now, this hot air ridge, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Here's the 500 millibar flow right here. And a lot of times these summer hot air ridges are void of cloudiness, but in this case, we do have a smattering of showers and thunderstorms there, and also, more importantly, there in North Carolina. As a matter of fact, this area here has the highest risk of severe weather today, which is sort of uncharacteristic, but it depends on what type of severe weather you're talking about, and we'll detail that here in a minute. I also just want to go back to visible because I love it so much. This is the visible satellite image with Iowa right here. Look at this, how high this thunderstorm top is. It has a shadow, and the sun isn't even that low, so that implies that thunderstorm's pretty high up. Notice the cumulus that are feeding into that storm right here. So that is kind of a sign that that storm is intensifying. And these out here are not necessarily severe in Illinois, but they are summer-like, just kind of popping up. Meanwhile, we go to the southeast. You see those same kind of pop-up thunderstorms in the Florida Panhandle, and the cooling effect of those storms with cirrus clouds coming off of the North Carolina activity. Let's take a look at that severe weather. Well, interestingly enough, the severe weather outlook was upgraded to enhanced 3 out of 5, almost to Atlanta, but covering a good chunk of South Carolina and up to around the Charlotte area. So you have severe weather is defined by three things: hail, high winds, and a possible tornado. So hail, we can pretty much, large hail at least, can be taken out of the equation here. This here exists solely for the idea that thunderstorms are going to produce severe downburst sort of winds. So when they collapse, they produce oftentimes very severe winds, especially when the air is very unstable. And this is a product of an environment that doesn't have a lot of wind shear just overall, and also doesn't have it near the surface. So thunderstorms are unlikely to produce tornadoes in this area, but are likely to produce severe gusts of wind. And you can see the radar loop here on this late Wednesday afternoon. Pretty active cluster there south of Raleigh. This activity is drifting, if any direction at all. It's going kind of west-southwest, I guess you could say. So these areas of Columbia and Charlotte still are going to be looking out for some thunderstorms forming or moving into their area today. A severe thunderstorm watch is in effect for much of South Carolina, a good chunk of North Carolina, including cities like Charlotte and Columbia, and even as far south as Charleston, with the thunderstorms forming south of Raleigh, as you said, but more could develop in this area later on. Meanwhile, there's a second part to the severe weather. This is the 2 out of 5 threat that exists for that. Remember, I showed you the visible satellite loop? Well, that's where that thunderstorm line is right there. Interestingly, now I do the severe weather outlook every morning. They did upgrade the tornado risk substantially. Rochester, Minnesota is right here. So this is south of Minneapolis by quite a bit. And then the northeast corner of Iowa as well. NATO cast really upped the ante on that too, with a 10% risk in that exact same area. So what's going on up there? Let's take a look at the radar, and you can see that the tornado risk area is right here. That's about where it was drawn. And some of these thunderstorms here are individual storms, so they're supercells, and they could interact with their environment sufficiently enough to produce a tornado in a few areas. Probably not a widespread outbreak, but 1 or 2 of those storms could actually have tornado warnings on them. That's a tornado watch area. Everything very predictable today. All the outlooks and the radar and everything is matching up. So if you're in Rochester, Mason City, La Crosse, Wisconsin, be on the lookout. Meanwhile, back along the line here into Nebraska and even Kansas, it's a severe thunderstorm watch where the winds are not as favorable. And as I said, every morning after the Storm Prediction Center update, which is roughly around 7:30 to 8 o'clock, I start working on a video. It's usually published sometime between 8 and 9 a.m. CDT, and be on the watch for that. If you're looking for general trends in severe weather, I publish that daily. Got some heavy rain hazards. Let's break it down. Today, Wednesday, southern central Minnesota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Wisconsin, and then that chunk down there in New Mexico. And then for Thursday, the New Mexico activity lets up, but from Topeka straight up into Iowa and covering Minneapolis and just about the entire state of Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan, slight risk of a heavy rain hazard in those areas. Here is the Weather Prediction Center total precipitation forecast for the next 5 days. If you see that yellow right there, that's the beginning of 4-inch patterns there. And it's already an area that's received a lot of rain, so that's why people are kind of concerned about that. But again, Mason City, La Crosse, even north of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, maybe over to Rhinelanders, some of the heaviest rain. Notice that New Mexico is just about done, and they're just in that risk for tonight, and that's about it. But because it already has rain there, flood watch in effect down there in New Mexico, and a flood watch which is just north of that thunderstorm area, really. It kind of mirrors a little bit north of the tornado watch and the severe thunderstorm watch that I just showed you. Tropical Atlantic forecast shows no activity for the next 7 days. Now, the last time I published this video was on Monday, and a storm popped up between that video and today, and that was Andrea. So off the list for Andrea. It formed way out in the central Atlantic and posed no threat to anybody really, and barely got going before it was shut down. If you're wondering, though, even though it seems like we're off to a slow start, really it's pretty early in the season, but the NOAA's hurricane forecast still calls for a 60% chance of above normal hurricanes, with major hurricanes at 3 to 5. And again, the disclaimer I always have to say with that is this is not a forecast of whether these are landfalling hurricanes or even where. If they do landfall, where they'll be. So it's just a number count. Hopefully they all stay out to sea. And then quickly we'll go to the east here in the Eastern Pacific, I should say. And the next names are Flossie, Gill, and Henriette. And there is a pretty high probability, 60% or greater chance, and the next storm would be Flossie, forming in this area in the next 7 days. And it looks as if so far, if a storm were to form, it would stay out over the Pacific and not curve back into Mexico. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.